The skies above Threxon, 5 shimmer with burnt orange hues as the twin suns began to set, their light cascading to the haze of ionized particles left by the retreating warships. On the jagged ridge above the valley, Carveth of Clan Drelnor, the apex predator of the Gorn species, stood silently, her body slick with the blood of her enemies, her fangs stained and her eyes narrowed with exhaustion. She had fought off the raiding Zergal packs for nearly 2 days, protecting her den and her cubs. But she was at her limit. The wound on her flank pulsed with heat and infection, and her right forelimb hung limply. She had only one choice left, a desperate one. She limped through the underbrush with the last of her strength, carrying the small, whimpering bundles of fur in her mouth until she reached the clearing at the human outpost. The humans had set up a research base nearby, neutral observers, studying local wildlife and energy fluctuations. Carveth didn't trust them. No Gorn did. Humans were unpredictable, dangerous, but they were also fiercely protective of their young, even of other species. She'd seen one risk its life for a wounded avian hatchling weeks earlier. It was a gamble, one she was forced to make. She approached the perimeter silently, keeping to the shadows until she was close enough to the edge of the human's defensive field. There, standing on the elevated platform, was the one called Mara, a human female with a strange calmness about her, the kind of stillness predators recognize not as fear, but as awareness. Carveth emerged slowly, head bowed, and dropped the 2 cubs at the edge of the line. Mara didn't reach for a weapon. She didn't panic. She simply crouched and held out her hands. The cubs squealed and huddled together, confused. Carveth gave a low growl, not a threat, but plea. Then she turned and vanished into the jungle. Mara blinked, stunned. The surveillance drones above had already recorded the event. The base commander was immediately alerted, but Mara waved them off. They're not hostile. She left them here for help. The next few hours were chaos. Biocontainment protocols were enacted, but Mara insisted on staying in the nursery chamber with the cubs. Despite their sharp claws and predator instincts, they responded to her soft voice, her warmth, her calm. She fed them a mix of human infant formula and protein paste synthesized for carnivores. They took to her, slept curled against her body. When the medic team tried to relocate them, they hissed and bit. Only Mara could calm them. Within 3 days, the cubs were walking behind her like ducklings. She named them Nox and Lyra. Surveillance footage went viral across Earth and allied systems. Humans were raising apex predator infants. The Gorn government was silent. Carveth did not return. Most assumed she had died. But Mara didn't believe that. Every night, she stood at the edge of the clearing with the cubs, letting them sniff the air. They always looked toward the trees, expectant, waiting. Meanwhile, the cubs grew fast. The humans watched in awe as Mara taught them not only language and behavior, but empathy. When one of the human researchers cut his hand, Lyra nuzzled his palm and whimpered. Nox would nudge trays of food toward anyone who looked hungry. They began to understand not just commands, but emotions. By the 3rd week, they could mimic over 30 human words and respond to gestures. And then came the night of the storm. A massive ionic surge swept across the jungle, knocking out half the base's systems. The protective field went down. Zergal raiders, the same species that had attacked the Gorn den, saw the opportunity. They stormed the facility at nightfall. Alarms blared. Chaos erupted. Most of the research team evacuated to the sublevels. But Mara didn't make it. She stayed behind because the cubs wouldn't leave her. The Zergal broke through the perimeter. They moved like shadows, blades glinting in the strobe of emergency lights. Mara stood in front of the cubs with a stun baton and a kitchen knife. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She fought. The first Zergal fell with a cracked skull. The second got past her, but Lyra lunged, tearing into its throat with adolescent fury. Nox followed, ripping into the legs of another. They fought together, 3 against many, and they held the line. By the time reinforcements arrived, the floor was slick with blood, and Mara was barely standing, a gash down her leg. But the cubs were alive, and so was she. The footage sent back to Earth caused a wave of outrage and admiration. The story made headlines across 20 systems. Human defends Gorn cubs in Zergal raid. Diplomatic representatives from both the Gorn and Human Federations convened immediately. War nearly broke out until Carveth appeared. She did not come as a predator, but as a witness. She limped into council chamber, her flank scarred, her eyes burning not with rage, but awe. She stood before the assembly and played the footage from her embedded drone, not just of the storm, but of everything. From the moment she left her cubs with the human, to their feeding, their play, their first words. She showed how Mara taught her offspring to care, to think, to trust. And then she showed the battle, the moment when her cubs defended their human mother, not with instinct, but with love. The room fell into stunned silence. "I am Carveth," she said, her voice gravel over stone. "Predator, hunter, mother. I left my children in the arms of a human, and I watched them become more, not weaker, not tamed, but greater than I could have made them alone." She paused, eyes scanning every alien dignitary present. "You call yourselves advanced, but you could not do what she did." Mara, still limping from her injury, was brought in then. She froze at the sight of Carveth, but the Gorn bowed her head low and placed her claws over her heart in a sign of respect. "She is not just human," Carveth said. "She is the bridge between predators and peace." The Federation stood unified for the first time in decades. The Gorn proposed a new alliance, not just with humans, but with their methods, their unpredictable empathy, their terrifying love. The cubs, now formerly citizens of both races, became symbols of this new age. They wore badges of Earth and Gorn, and when they walked beside Mara, now ambassador to the Gorn Federation, the crowd always fell silent. They were more than children. They were hope. And Carveth? She returned to the wilds, watching from afar. She never approached the base again. But she watched her children grow, saw them speak before assemblies, protect the weak, and snarl at injustice. And every night, from the shadow of the trees, she watched a human who had once taken her desperate gamble and turned it into a miracle. A mother not of blood, but of choice. The predator had left her cubs with a human, and in return, she had witnessed something her species had never understood, a force stronger than teeth, more enduring than claws, something that made even Deathworlders weep and apex hunters bow in reverence. Humanity,